All right. All right. Welcome back to the Drew Sutton Leadership Show. We are here hitting the hard hitting topics in leadership just for you. This week, we've been talking about vision casting, the importance of having a vision as a leader. One of my favorite statements of all time is that the only person in the Navy who doesn't know what they're doing is the admiral. That's an old statement from the British Navy. The idea is that below the king, below the top guy, everybody's following orders. Now, they're obviously well informed and they're engaged, but it's the job of leadership to come up with the vision that we're going to follow. So we've been talking about vision all week. Today, we're going to do something a little special, though. We got some special guests for you. This is Brian Lee and Gary Jones from Aim All Now. We're going to throw them up here on the stage. Here they are. We are going to do, this is a longer show, so just be ready for that. If you are tuning in, I appreciate it. Show is going to run for about an hour. We're going to do something different. I would love your comments. What we're going to do is I'm going to read out a case study, and then the three of us are just going to talk about how to build momentum. So before we get into that, let me give Brian and Gary a little bit of an introduction here. Brian is a leadership scientist. That's kind of a fun idea. We'll get some thoughts on him from that. He's been doing it for over 30 years. Brian and I met at a networking event, and he just really caught my eye. Super fantastic, very, very, very smart guy, into ontology for those nerdy of us out there. And he started Aim All Now because he said the only way that we can build momentum is if we learn how to focus. And as an ADD victim myself, actually a survivor maybe, Aim All Now helps us as a company focus in and start to build momentum. Gary Jones is a relationship scientist, equally fantastic guy. This is the yin and yang of leadership relationship. We have the brains and the heart. He's been doing it for 30 years as well. He started his career as a pastor and a police chaplain. So not only was he a relational scientist in an academic sense, but he did it in the field where tensions are the highest. So super excited for these guys. They've been doing some fun things. Before we do that, let's go to our sponsors. Of course, we have the Black Investing Box. If you want your kids to have a better relationship with money than you did, check out the Black Investing Box at theblackinvestingbox.com. And Drew Sutton Leadership, your business is like an airplane. You got to have a solid pilot in there if you want to avoid that. If you're tired of the turbulence and you want to get to the next level, come see us. We'll make you a flight plan that'll get you there. Okay, all the preliminaries are out of the way. Let's get into the show. So Brian, is there anything you want to add to the introduction? You want to tell us how you got here, what gets you excited, and then we'll go to you, Gary.
Yeah, I started out 30 years ago wanting to understand transformation. That led me into a discovery of how individuals grow and change. And then I suddenly found myself with the responsibility to reorganize a nation. And I had to embrace the complexity of seventh generation planning and realized that there is a natural design to human organization existence, and leadership is one of the essential systems. And so my journey has been about understanding that natural design and teaching people how to cooperate with it so they can get better results.
Awesome. We're going to pull that thread on seventh generational design here in a second. One of the things that I've enjoyed talking to you and getting to know you over the last couple of months is, people talk about a life's work. And I'm just going to tell you that Brian started small on the question of transformation. And then that question grew and grew and grew. And it's truly a life's work and expertise, which is fun to see for those millennials and younger out there. It is worth sticking your head in a problem for long enough to figuring it out. Okay, Gary, we're going to throw you up on the screen here.
Thanks, Drew. I guess Brian and I met somewhere in the 70s. I want to say 76, but that could be a little unsure. And Brian has this technology that really respects everyone as a team member that I just really fell in love with. To this day, I still use a lot of it, almost an intro, but beyond the intro, just testing to see whether or not someone has ears to hear and is teachable. And Brian just brings that package together from an individual to a collective effort of a team in a very, very powerful way. And I've enjoyed our encounter forever, even though sometimes he gives me a headache.
I think that's the definition of a good partnership. That's fantastic. That's right. I like the idea. I like what you brought up there is that respecting everyone as a leader, it's super hard. You have to pull in the direction that you're going. You have to set the vision and go towards it. But you have to respect everyone along the way. I tell people, if you want to make money, you should sell drugs. That's the best way to make money. The problem is that the competition is cutthroat and the regulations are kind of steep, right? So we all know that we don't want to be selling drugs. That's not what we want to be doing. Actually, I do have a friend who's a pharmacist, and to this day I call him up. I'm like, Sam, you still selling drugs? And he responds, Drew, don't judge. I got a family to feed. But respecting everyone is what makes leadership so hard. It is easy for command and control. Communism, for instance, I'm a huge fan of communism as long as I get to be the dictator. And so your comment about the system respecting everyone and truly being a holistic, I call it a closed loop where what you're asking fits everybody in, everybody has a piece to play. It's super cool.
And the thing about respect, Drew, is you have to give people the opportunity to choose. Leaders who don't recognize that followership is a choice and doesn't respect the fact that every person is a leader of their own scope of responsibility and sphere of influence. And if you want them to go your way, you have to respect the fact that they have to take care of themselves and their families at the same time. And so if you want them to go your way, ask them. Ask them if they will go your way. Don't just tell them. Because if you just tell them, you're not really being respectful. Respectful allows people to make choices.
That's right.
Yep. No, I totally agree. I work with for-profit and nonprofits, and the first objection I get is folks say, "Well, we're a nonprofit. What you're talking about doesn't work for us." I'm like, pause. Every company is a volunteer company, right? Just because you're paying them doesn't mean they don't have to also buy in and volunteer.
Right.
Gary, you want to throw something in there?
Well, again, one of the highlights that I always try to bring focus in on is, do you have ears to hear? Are you teachable? And it's exciting just to see the response. But Brian just takes it to a simple level of, hey, this is where we're trying to get to. Do you want to participate? And instead of that being told, because no one feels respected when they're just told something.
Yeah. Well, let me jump in with this week's topic. This week's topic is vision. So I think that what both of you kind of said there, we were talking about the volunteers engaging in the conversation, but let's spend a couple 5 or 6 minutes here talking about vision. How do you construct a vision? That's one question. And the second question is, how do you construct a vision that the employees want to engage with, that folks want to follow you in, that you feel you have integrity to ask them to join in with you? What are your thoughts on vision? Gary, we'll go with you first.
Well, again, I think it's appropriate for them to feel to be a part of the process. It's not a lecture approach; it's a shared approach, where they feel that it matters what they are looking for or saying. It's not just something that's dictated; it's something that's gone through a process where people can make those connections and feel there was a buy-in to that connection, and it builds from there.
Yeah. Brian, over to you.
Vision is part of the natural design of continual progress. And what people want to learn is what their identity is, because their identity is their timeless reason to exist. And vision is the next step of progress in the realization of that identity. Yeah.
As usual, you say things and I have to take a moment to digest them. I think that's one of the sad things. We throw around words. I talked about you being an ontologist. And one of the things that most appreciate about you is that you use words on purpose. And I think as leaders, we fail to use words on purpose. We think that our words have the same impact as those that follow us. And that's not really the case. We have to be very clear on what we're trying to say and then deliver. And a lot of times it means we have to shut up, which is hard, especially hard for me. Let me pull up. This is your vision of a focused tune-up. You want to talk us through this, Brian?
Yes, this is a great picture because, it's Formula One racing, which is the most structured sport on the planet, and it's the fastest sport on the planet. And every person that's around here, you see a driver and you see the car and you see all these people around there. Every person knows that their role is just as important as every other person's role. And in fact, if they don't do their role as the leader and owner of that role, then they can't get the performance that they want, so that they can get the win of the race, the progress that they're looking for. And if you think of this as people come together so that the organization can win, the organization is actually the driver of the car. And we want that organization to get back on track and to be able to get in its momentum and groove and be able to win that race and deliver the value to the customers.
Man, I like so much about what you just said there. One of the things I like the most is that you said the organization is the driver of the car. I think as a leader, it's so time like we see ourselves, this is my car, we're driving this car. And the ego, even it's a subconscious thing, but the ego of saying I'm important, and if I don't do it, then the car is not going to go. But really, the driver of the car is kind of a collective effort, and it's also a function of what the car is supposed to do. We as leaders need to understand our roles. I like to say, if you want to get some R&R, you got to master your R&R, which is if you want to get some rest and relaxation, you got to master your roles and responsibilities. And this is a beautiful picture of that.
And there's a great, just if I could tell a quick story.
Yeah.
There was a hospital in London in the NICU, the surgery on babies, and their success rate, their survival rate was dropping, and they didn't know why. And they were holding a meeting of all the doctors and the nurses and everybody who works together and trying to solve this problem. And what they ended up doing was inviting a Formula One racing team, the Ferrari team, to look at what they were doing. And the Ferrari team pointed out that they lacked the level of control that they needed in the transition from the operating room to the recovery room. And they were missing information because of how they were transitioning their control. And in the Formula One racing, they had already solved that problem. And so they shared how they solved that communication problem with the movement into the pit and out of the pit. And they were able to turn their whole, the hospital was able to turn around its success rate with its patients.
Yeah, I love that story, but I also love that you're highlighting that it's communication. The hardest thing of a team is that a team has to communicate. Like when you can do it yourself, all the communication is happening in here. Mm-hmm. But then when you add 2 people, 3 people, 4 people, 5 people, it gets really complicated. Right. Gary, you want to talk about some tricks and tips and tricks for the communication?
Well, but it's that expectation that you're going to be heard, understood, and feel connected. People want to be a part of a successful team. We all feel that pressure at times when it might not be going as smoothly, but when we're a part of that vision, that's a fix and puts things in perspective and allows us to see the performance that needs to change so we get a better result. That's where the team can really flourish.
Yeah. I absolutely love that. Cool. Okay, well, let's kick over from here. Actually, I'm going to give you both one more shout out here. You want me to show any more slides, or do you want to kick into the main event, which is the case study?
I just want to point out on here, notice it says evolving your culture for continual progress. Peter Drucker says culture eats strategy for breakfast.
Oh, yes.
Okay. And the reason that is true is because people need that foundation of respect has to extend all the way to the organization. The organization is a person too. And there is a first principle of vision that says where there is no vision, the people disperse. And everybody requires vision to work with, to work in, to work on. And so the idea is that we're always keeping our systems running. At the same time, we're giving up our current operational existence so that we can get to the next version of ourselves where we're experiencing greater value. And so it is the alignment of vision, everybody choosing to align their individual visions to the shared vision, that you get the energy, the life force flowing in the right direction. And so mastering organizational momentum is aligning all of that life force that comes from all of the people so that they get to experience their culture moving to the next level to sustain the operation at the next level.
Yeah, I love that. And for those that are watching, you may have to rewind and kind of re-listen to that. There was so much packed in there. I'm giving you a bonus power up for that. That was amazing. Okay, Gary, last thoughts for you on this slide, and then we're going to jump over to the case study.
Again, it's a great slide. It shows that people have they fit differently in the team structure with different roles to play. And there's nothing wrong with having a different role as long as I feel connected to everyone else on that same vision casting. And it's nice to see what we can accomplish when we roll up our sleeves and work together at better performance. And that's where the power and the enthusiasm kicks in.
Yeah, I love it. Different roles, but they're all important. Every single person on there is equally important, right? And they have to be connected to each other. I love it.
That's right. Okay,
we are going to kick over to our next section. This is the economic development. Okay. So the problem here is we have an organization. I've lost my notes. Okay, we have an organization. I'm going to read this case study, and then we'll let Brian. You're going to jump in first. And the way this section is going to flow, folks, is we're going to read the case study, and then we're just going to talk about how we would solve it. So we're going to pretend that this was a real company, and then we are going to solve their problem for you, helping people master momentum. Okay, case study: the economic crisis on the West Coast, on a western coastline. The Western Economic Development Agency, located in a state with a significant coastline, is facing a severe crisis. Over the past couple of years, the agency has lost over 30% of its most important staff just due to retirements. This attrition has severely impacted the agency's ability to function effectively. The problem is the local industries are threatening to relocate to a southern state with a large coastline, and that's going to severely drain the economy. Darren, our economic development director, is under immense pressure to reverse this trend, rejuvenate the local economy, but unfortunately, for the past 3 quarters, he's not been able to do so. His team has lost momentum. They have failed to meet key metrics. Darren personally, his head is on the chopping block. His job is on the chopping block. And that is super frustrating because it's super frustrating to go to work and be giving your all and still not hitting your metrics. It's just not fair. So how are we going to help Darren reverse the decline in team morale and productivity and get back on top? Now, I'm going to give you a couple of metrics that he's responsible for: job creation, investment and attraction, business retention, and then community engagement. And his challenges, again, are low morale, productivity decline on his team, which leads to high turnover. And so he's kind of stuck in this constant understaffing, which forces him to take lesser qualified roles. Okay. You guys understand the challenge ahead of us here? Do you have any questions?
I think I'm good.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's hit it then. How are you going to be? I'm going to play the part of Darren. How are you going to solve my problems?
The first challenge is getting people into the same frame of thinking about the problem that we're trying to solve. And so there's a part of the natural design of organizations is there are these things called first principles. And a first principle is a principle that is true in any context, in any circumstance. And the first principle of authority is kind of long, but I'm not going to quote it right now. I'm just going to pick one piece of it, and that one piece is clear context leads to confident decisions. So when a team is able to say, we need to get better or we need to get different because the results we're getting are not satisfying. We're not getting the results we want. As soon as you can admit that challenge together, then you have the opportunity to make decisions to become something next. And it's that transformational journey that is the solution to the problem. Now, transformation is the number one most complex undertaking any organization will go through. It involves every person, it involves every process, it involves every asset. Why? Because you have to decide what not to change as well as decide what to change, what to keep, what to add, what to retire, what to modify, and everybody's got to adopt the new configuration of the solution. So framing the problem in context is what you have to do. And so you have to elevate and say, what is our identity? Why do we exist? And fundamentally, a economic development department's job isn't to be the economy. It's to facilitate and enable and support an economy that runs on its own merits and its own initiative. So it is a catalyst, it is a affirmer, it is a problem solver, it is an inspirational infuser, but it is not really on the critical path of the economy itself. And so understanding that context of why we exist as an organization is the ideal picture, and our current circumstances is the current picture. And then we have to carve out our vision of what the next step of progress is really going to be. And that's the conversation with the leadership team.
Yeah, there was a lot in there. So I'm Darren here and I'm thinking, but I think what I heard you say is that, to quote AA, admitting it is the first step. Saying this is not where I want to be.
Mm-hmm.
So understanding the context and then saying, I don't want to be here, that's actually one of the best things that you can do is admit you have a problem, because admitting that you have that implies that there can be a change. And then that change, there's more tasks in the change, but admitting you have the problem is actually like a catalyst to begin the change. And you can't begin that change until you've admitted, hey, we are not doing what we need to do. And then,
right.
So and I want to jump over here to Gary, but real quick. So I'm Darren. We've met at a networking event. You've said this, and I'm like, okay, I'm ready. I have a problem, and I think you're the guy. You're the guy that I need to solve my problem. How much time do I need to set aside to begin the conversation with you, or to like start wrapping my head around the context that you've been describing?
Is that for Gary?
Yeah, let's run that over to Gary. I like it.
Hey, thanks, Darren. I want to give my time back to Brian and ask him to walk us through the issues that we have for concerns and what that could do for Darren in his circumstances. Is that okay, Mr. Lee?
Yeah. So just as a side note, one of the things that really works well in complex change is some people are going to have their brain in the complexity of the problem, and some people are going to have their heart in the relationships of the people. And you need both. And sometimes a leader is the one in authority, the one in the influence seat at the moment, has to prioritize one of those two. And so when you're in the midst of a problem with a bunch of leaders, the leaders will not admit that they have a problem. They'll admit that something else has a problem, and it's their job to make sure it gets fixed. But if you approach it like, hey, you got a problem and you need to admit it, that's the very reason why they will decide you're not qualified.
So what you're saying is, if I'm a leader and I'm listening to this podcast right now, the way that I can be a 1% leader above the rest of the crowd is to admit that maybe a little bit of it is my fault.
That would be unusual. Yes, you would set yourself apart if you're able to do that.
Awesome. Well, that's my
And
type of audience. My type of audience has that sort of emotional intelligence. So
but
audience,
watch what happens when you call a meeting of all your leadership team and you say, hey, we need to hear from each other on what concerns we have. Now, the word concerns tends to be categorized in a negative space, but I want you to realize that concern is neutral. Concern is positive or negative. And so a concern could be, I see 3 opportunities and I'm not sure which one of those opportunities we're going to choose.
so concerns don't have to always be negative. A concern can be positive and negative. That's fantastic.
Right. Yep.
And that's part of leadership. Leadership has to be willing to see first the opportunities that are coming so that you have the ability to let go of the opportunity that you're currently pursuing in favor of a new opportunity that suddenly becomes obvious that it's going to deliver greater value than the one that you've been pursuing. That's called navigation, and navigating your journey from your current to your future is a constant in leadership.
Okay. I'm going to push that over here to Gary. Gary, talk us through the heart. I know that in your all's organization, you play well with each other here, but you're kind of the heart of the organization with relationships. So you've gotten me and my team kind of on a workshop. I know you guys do workshops. You also do kind of longer term coaching. How would you walk me through the relationships that might be, the relational problems that might be on this team?
Well, again, the heard, understood, and connected approach is allow everyone to understand what they say and what they're focused on matters, and it's captured, it's put down. Being understood is sharing those priorities back and forth as to are they really feeling heard, understood, and connected? The only way that's going to be impacted for them is to go through that process to make that list. Brian does a phenomenal job on the concerns, and he's right. Most people don't like admitting they have problems. And the way that you can approach that where it's non-threatening and they see the team structure, it gives them more hope or encouragement that they're going to influence and change and do things that they maybe have known for a long time. It wasn't working right, or it needs to be done a little differently. But once someone gets through that fog of feeling heard, understood, and connected, it allows them to feel like they're a part of the driving of prioritizing, of getting things in a new area that gives it a chance to change and have impact for that organization.
Gary, do you remember the Las Cruces situation in New Mexico?
I do. With
just say a couple things about what you saw happen with all the people.
Well, I was really observing Brian facilitate people that were trying to define what their problems were in healthcare. And I don't know what session it was, but Brian came up and kind of put his arm around me and said, "Oh, this thing isn't going to work. These people are going to come together and share some things briefly. Then they're going to have an understanding that, they're part of the problem. They could be the problem." And so I'm like, gosh, why would Brian say that? He's given me another headache. Now I'm trying to figure that out. And lo and behold, within the next session, maybe 2, they decided that they couldn't really address anything. So they just shut their whole seminar down, their whole workshop down. It just didn't want to take responsibility. There was no metric for someone living or dying. It just kind of internally shut itself down. And I'm like, gosh, that Brian, he can give me headaches, but he's pretty accurate with his assessment.
I like what you, that's a great story. Because this week for me on the show is we're talking about vision. I think something that I'm pulling out of there is that when you're setting vision, the stakes have to be high enough to matter. Like you said, life and death, that people are just willing to let dysfunction run when the stakes aren't that high. Like if we're just, I don't know, if we're painting white fences white, who cares? So when there's dysfunction, there's no impetus to change. And so one of our jobs as a leader is to help people see, no, what we do really matters, and to keep that pressure on so that we are willing to stick through the hard change cycle.
Yes.
I like that. I love that.
An example of this at a real human level was in a small town in upstate New York. There was um, uh, a number of the young teenage girls had come down with AIDS,
Mm,
and they traced the problem to one person, and
mm.
that one person was purposefully knew he
Oh my
had
goodness.
AIDS and was purposefully spreading AIDS in the
Oh my goodness.
community. And he was the first person to be criminally charged with that behavior. But the town was in crisis, and they brought me in to facilitate a 1 day healing session for the parents and the teenagers in the community and the healthcare providers at the local, county, state, and federal level. I mean, CDC was there. I mean, we had everybody there, and we created an environment where people could vent, they could express the pain and hurt, the reality of the consequence. And it was expressing that made room for a path of solution, of navigating through the morass of pain and anger and hurt that was there. And when we brought the whole group back together after all these breakout sessions, I was standing up there and saying, "Okay, everyone, it's time to gather around." And I was using the talk quiet technique to get everybody's attention. And all the adults were not paying attention, but the teenagers slipped right in to the middle of the auditorium, and the feedback, they provided feedback at the end and said, "Those adults are so rude to the speaker." And pretty soon, everybody gathered around, and we were able to end that session with a debrief that allowed for um, people to begin to introduce new solutions.
You know, what I love about that, and I'm kind of highlighting it here with the solution is the brain and the heart. So often in business consulting, we attack problems from an analytical perspective, and I'm certainly guilty of this. I love little boxes that represent quadratic equations and tensor fields. But the truth is, as a leader, it is a heart problem, not just from a buy-in. I think that leadership so often we talk about EQ, and what we're really talking about is how do I get you to get in onto my vision, onto my agenda. But what you're describing, and both of you have been describing for the last maybe 10 or 15 minutes here, well, I guess maybe 10 minutes, is the idea that it's a heart problem, that people have hearts and you have to intelligence. So it's not just emotional intelligence. Oh, I need to analyze you so I can manipulate you. It is, I need to hear you. What is heard, understood, and connected from Gary here. That is super powerful. And actually, for my audience, I know I talk a lot about the four ways and mind, heart, soul, and strength. Really, this is a beautiful story here that Brian's telling about reaching the heart, not reaching the heart to get buy-in, but reaching the heart to listen and to understand. And then we can get somewhere. And then we can get somewhere. I think is a beautiful story.
Right. The heart controls the will, and the mind provides opportunity to
Yeah.
apply the will.
And I think that that's what I often say that I sit at the intersection. That's kind of what my triangles are about, between professionalism, which is systems and thinking and tools, and practicality, which is just how do you run a business and make money, but also passion, because we as humans, we are hearts that are trying to accomplish something. But let's move us forward. Let's close out this section of the case study. We've talked about how to discover the problems, but you have a momentum tune-up, which we're going to take a look at here in a second. But you have how would you go about, and I want both Gary and Brian to kind of talk about this. We've got all the problems on the table. How do I, as Darren, get my team engaged and start functioning like this high octane crew? What are some practical steps I can use to do that?
Okay. So, a journey of change begins from right where you are, just as you are, with just what you have, with the knowledge of where you've been. And people like to say, "Oh, journey of 1,000 miles begins with the first step," and I like to tell them that they're completely wrong. It always starts from right where you are, just as you are, with just what you have, with the knowledge of where you've been, with the destination in mind, and then the next step, because you have to have a direction to walk in, and you can't start from anywhere except where you are. And so every person is dragging into the vision session the burden and responsibility to not break what they're already responsible for, and be ready to allow it to change at the same time. So
Cool.
that starting point is where you respect the organization. That's why a focus control session is so critical. Focus control session is an opportunity for people to take a time out together on behalf of the organization, fully respecting each other and themselves in the context of what their responsibility for, to say, wow, what is on my mind and my heart today about the performance we need so that we can get the progress we want tomorrow. And that control question is what allows people to divest themselves of their concerns. And concerns are actually sometimes not really concerns. If it's truly a concern, it's about information exchange. I'm concerned about this, and you have the information I need, you give it to me, that resolves my concern. But most of the time, concerns are really camouflaged. The concern isn't a concern, it's an issue. Something's broken. It's not a concern, it's an assignment that needs to be dispatched to the right team that we're already got available to do the work. Sometimes a concern is a risk, and it's about mitigating something that is creating confusion because of the threat level that it has. Sometimes a concern is really just a requirement of change that a smart person, an insightful person, a operationally burdened person can articulate as the specific change we need to make, and it just needs to be implemented.
So a focus control session is a weekly meeting or a monthly meeting that I would instill with my team. What does a control session look like for me to practically implement?
It's very healthy to do on a weekly basis in a leadership team. If a team's never done a focus control session, it can be an intervention experience. They can experience it for the first time, and sometimes organizations just aren't ready to mature their leadership systems, and so that it can be sustainable. And they need a timeout and an intervention, and then kind of clears everybody's mind and heart. Because what people try to do is they try to hold the structure of change in their head, and if they can run fast, and they can, as you described earlier, if you get the space of leadership control within the frame of somebody's responsibility, and they can see that, they can run with it, and they can navigate and keep their balance. As soon as the leadership scope extends beyond a person's authorized scope of responsibility, then multiple people have to play, and you must give them the space to solve together that which they don't have the authority to solve alone.
I run into this a lot with my clients. The idea is, I call it, so get stuff done, GSD, get stuff done.
Mm-hmm.
All the people that are in leadership have a strong sense of get stuff done, GSD. But the problem is to go from GSD will take you to about 10 employees. But to go from GSD to the scale that you want, you have to become a CEO mindset, which is you have to have that clarity, and you have to have that empowered team, and you have to have those optimized operations. So go from GSD to CEO, it's communication. Actually, that's one of my big takeaways from this session, is that I think you said it just a second ago. If you have a concern, it's an information problem. We need to define the information flow. Mm-hmm. I love that simplicity. Brian, I want to jump over to you. So you need a focus control session. That's a once a week meeting. We'll come back to that here in a second. Brian, Gary, what are your thoughts here on the case study here? What is the practical solution I, as Darren, can implement to start having some traction?
So I've had the privilege of sitting down with Brian in front of many Darrens. And it usually is a very simplistic approach. There's some Q&A time. And then Brian will share what he has seen from the information he's gathered. And most of the time, the Darrens are amazed how accurate, how insightful. And Brian, we have celebrated this natural design that allows us to take it back, and then that adventure has direction and substance and can bring clarity in play, that not just for this problem, but for any future issues that might be addressed. And Brian can bring those things and highlight them towards the vision of finding that solution and implementing it. And that's what I enjoy being a part of. Someone's got a real problem, and all of a sudden there's a strategy, a natural design that says, but if we modify this, watch how this impacts this issue. And so it's been a joy being a part of that.
So I'm going to maybe sum that up with the statement, most solutions are simple. Is that a fair enough statement?
I like it.
And that's not to say that it's simple to discover, but generally, if your solution is a 17-headed Hydra, you're probably avoiding this simple thing. I had a sales conversation with a friend recently, and he was coming up with these elaborate solutions to try to meet people and to do leads. And I said, why don't you just call them? He's like, well, I don't want to call them. Like, just call them. Like, you have a solution that they want. You're not talking to them. Why don't you just call them? I personally send my wife a lot of Facebook reels. I'm like, oh, this is what I want to say, but I just don't want to say it. So I'll send her a Facebook reel. And she's like, do you want to say something to me, Drew? And I'm like, no, I'm a completely mature individual. I'm definitely not being passive aggressive here. So yeah, the solution is generally simple. Like, there's a lot of really successful folks out there and a lot of really successful teams. And the reason they're successful is because they have simple solutions that kind of push through a little point of tension, but they go to that point and they just drive through it. But one of my other favorite phrases is, you can't see the label when you're on the inside of the bottle. Like, it's easy to see other people's problems, but it's hard to see yours. And that's why it makes sense to hire somebody like Amal now and Brian and Gary to get that figured out. Okay.
Let me tag something down on simple. Einstein said, make things as simple as you can and no simpler. And what that means is you have to respect the complexity that is actually present.
Yeah.
Because here's the trap. Everybody knows the KISS principle, right? Keep it simple, stupid. But today's world is too complex. And everybody wants the low-hanging fruit. I want you to know that the orchards have all been picked. There is no low-hanging fruit anymore.
I like that.
Keep it simple, stupid is actually keep it stupid, simple. So you need a new KISS. The new KISS is keep it systemically sustainable. You've got to raise your expectations to actually see the sustainable future you're trying to hit. And there is the level of complexity that is actually present. And the way you tame complexity is by encapsulating it. So when the author of Tom Sawyer said to a friend of his on the street, when asked, hey, my speaker just canceled for my luncheon today. And Mark Twain said, well, how long would I get to speak? And he said, 20 minutes. And he said, well, I'm not available then. If you let me speak for 3 hours, I'm available. But to actually have something good to say in 20 minutes, that's a lot of work. Simplicity on the other side of complexity is hard work.
Yeah. The simple truths, once you articulate them, everybody's like, oh, but the truth is it takes somebody outside the bottle, right? Like outside of your context to help you see your context. And that's why those weekly focus sessions, I tell you what, though, we are running out of time here. Out of time. Sorry. This is our out of time show song. We are running out of time here. So let's sum up with each of you giving me your 2 favorite pieces of advice. How can people get a hold of you? Brian, how can people get a hold of you?
They can email Brian Lee at amallnow.com.
Okay, and that's right down here on the video here. Awesome.
And then we also have an assessment. Do I need a focus assessment? And what I want people to know is that assessment lays out the checklist of what you can do. So if you embrace that checklist that assessment as a checklist, you can help yourself to a higher degree of cooperating with natural design, and you will change your life. And so just getting that free assessment is an entrance, is a doorway into a better future.
Yeah. So this is the assessment down here, folks. I will be putting that in a link if you want to go check out the assessment. This is what the assessment looks like. That's the Go Giver Gong for the Drew Sutton Leadership Show. This is the giveaway. All my guests have a giveaway. If you're going to be on the show, I'm going to ask you to give giveaway here. This this focus assessment will help you understand where your team is at and what you need to do to get to the next level, to start having those focus sessions, and what areas you need to be focusing on. We are running out of time. So Gary, I'm going to give you last two comments. Actually, each of you get 2 comments, and then we are going to wrap the show up here. So Gary, go.
Hey, just for the sake of continuity, my email address is garyjones at aimallnow.com. Sorry.
All right. Gary Jones at aimallnow. Awesome.
My favorite connection still is the heard, understood, and connected, where someone walks away knowing that
heard, understood, and connected. So as a leader, make sure you are heard. You're helping your people be heard, understood, and connected. I love it.
That's right.
All right, Brian.
Remember, respect starts with you knocking on people's hearts, not you knocking their front door down and making yourself at home in their lives. So leadership begins with an ask, not a tell.
I love it. I love it.
And,
okay.
The last point I want to make is that shared focus is more powerful than individual inspiration.
Shared focus is more powerful than individual inspiration. Yeah, I love it. Okay, with that, we are going to be wrapping up the show here. Remember, if you want to be on the show, if you want to be a guest, it could be you. I can give you a special episode where we highlight your business, talk about what your powers are, and allow you to serve your call. With that, we are out.